Welcome, and thank you for joining the Statue of Liberty-Ellis Island Foundation for the first installment of Conversations with Reflections on Lady Liberty and the Immigrant Experience. We're delighted to be joined today by Andrew Tisch. Andrew is co-chairman of the board and chairman of the executive committee of Lowe's Corporation. He is also co-editor of Journeys, An American Story. This inspiring book features 72 essays about immigration and American greatness. From Tony Bennett to Michael Bloomberg, Gabby Giffords to Marlo Thomas, and many names that are not so famous, the book's contributors share their own family story of coming to America. Andrew included an essay as well, chronicling his grandfather's experiences. In 2017, the foundation had the honor of celebrating the Tisch family at our annual Heritage Awards. Andrew soon joined the foundation's board of directors, and we are lucky to have him. To learn more about the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation, go to statueofliberty.org.
Well, Andrew, first of all, it's nice to be with you today.
Virtually, I'd rather be with you in person, though.
Yes, that would be much better, but we'll do that soon, I hope. The Tisch family story, if you had to talk about the American dream, it would be the American dream. Now, there are lots of different versions of the American dream, but the Tisch family story, of course, the part I love is when I guess it would have been your grandfather or great-grandfather, was the basketball player at City College.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather. And the name was too long to put into a chant, so they shortened it to Tisch, as I understand it, and that's how you got your name.
Well, the family lore has it that we came over here in 1903, 1904. My great-grandfather's name in Ukraine was Shlomi Titensky. And when he
that doesn't quite flow off a cheerleader's.
Yeah, it's not exactly the easiest name to say, but I guess in Russian it was easy to say it. So when he got to Ellis Island, he became Shlomo Titensky or Tishensky or something like that. And my grandfather went to college as Abraham Tishensky. He was a particularly good basketball player. He was captain of the CCNY basketball team in 1917, 1918. And family lore has it that Tisch was his nickname. And it was certainly easier to say go Tisch than go Tishinsky or go Titensky. And so he showed up at CCNY as Abraham Tishinsky and left as Al Tisch. And that's the name he carried for the rest of his life. And that's been our family name.
Well, that is about the most unique way I've heard of a person Americanizing their name. Of course, a lot of people did, once they became citizens, change their name from a difficult sounding name to an American sounding name. Not unusual, but usually not brought on by the cheers of a basketball crowd. So that's a pretty interesting start to your American life. When you sat down for family dinners, one of the things we did in our family is we waited too long to collect some of the stories. By the time we were collecting them and interested in them, our rather large family had forgotten them. And then they debated which was which, and so we came away not knowing what the real story was.
Well, basically, much of this is family lore and not family history. You know, it's how the stories have evolved over the years. There is no, for instance, in our family, there is no family history, no written family history. It's just the stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. And I have one great uncle who is in his 90s who remembers a lot of these, and he can validate many of the facts, which is unusual for most families.
That is.
So we can go back a few generations, and our family history had been, or the family lore had been that we got out of Ukraine by the family leaving Dnepropetrovsk and going to Odessa, and half the family turning left and going to Tashkent, and the other half turning right and coming to the United States. Well, we found the ship's manifest at Ellis Island that said that the family came through Hamburg and not through Odessa. Well, in order to come through Hamburg, you couldn't get to Tashkent. So we must have taken the train from Dnepropetrovsk to Hamburg. Well, it just so happens if they were fleeing oppression or fleeing conscription or what have you, the smartest thing that they could have done at that time was to get off the train in the greatest Jewish city in the world at that time, which was Warsaw. And for some reason, my great-grandfather, we don't know exactly why, chose to continue on to Hamburg and get on a ship and go to America. Had he gotten off the ship in Warsaw in 1903, we know exactly what happened in 1933. Hitler took over Germany, and in 1937-38, he took over Poland, and the family would have been eradicated at that point. So something drove my great-grandfather to desire to go to America, to take the chance to get on a ship and be seasick for this. In those days, it was like a 5 or 6 week crossing in not very stable ships, but to make that treacherous crossing in order to build something better for his family. So we are eternally grateful to my great-grandfather, who then sent for his wife, Dina, and his 3 children to have them join him in America 6 months after he showed up. So that's the history/lore of how we got here.
I've found interesting in your family history the idea of purchasing the hotel. Was it in Lakewood, New Jersey?
In Lakewood, New Jersey.
How did that happen? What experience did your uncle and father have that made them think they could run a hotel?
Well, my grandfather was in the garment business. He sold boys' knickers and corduroy. I think corduroy was his specialty, I think. But he never loved the garment business. So he and my grandmother was as sharp as can be. I mean, it's the only thing that I regret is that she did not have the opportunity to show her independent business prowess. But they always experimented with the real estate business. They always had something going on. They started in the late 1930s, early 1940s. They bought a set of camps in Blairstown, New Jersey, called Camps Lincoln and Laurel. And that was probably the first introduction to the real estate business. And they always liked that. My father started getting a law degree at Harvard and hated law school. And at about the same time, they saw an ad in the New York Times for a hotel that was being leased in Lakewood, New Jersey, called Laurel and the Pines, and thought, with the war ending, and this was 1946, with the war having ended, people are going to start to go out again and start to travel again, and that this might be a good time to go into the hotel business. And the timing couldn't have been better. So they leased the hotel for the season, did well enough in that season to be able to buy the hotel for the next year, and were often running in the hotel business. And then bought the Laurel and the Pines was a seasonal hotel. It operated in the winter. So they bought a corresponding hotel in the Catskills called the Grand Hotel in High Mount, New York, that operated during the summer. And right after Passover in Lakewood, New Jersey, they took, because they didn't want to spend money on furniture, they took the furniture from the lobby in the Laurel and the Pines and took it up and made that the lobby furniture in the Grand Hotel in High Mount, New York, and they shuttled the furniture back and forth a couple of years. In the meantime, acquiring more hotels, so they acquired a number of hotels in the Jersey Shore, ultimately the Traymore Hotel in Atlantic City, leased a few smaller hotels, the McAlpin and a few others in New York City. And that became the basis of their real estate business that ultimately led to, in 1955, them building the Americana Hotel in Val Harbor, Florida. And that was a grand slam home run as people started traveling not only locally by car, but getting on airplanes to go on vacation. And that's really how they got started in the business.
Isn't it amazing? It's really, when you think about it, it's such a short period in history that the Tisch family changed from Ukrainian peasants to philanthropists in New York and other places.
My grandfather, I don't know about my great-grandfather's philanthropy, but my grandfather, I do know, was always had a great feel for the community and a great feel for philanthropy. And certainly his DNA was that a major responsibility was, if you were able to, you give back, you work within the community, that you have yourself, and it's a series of concentric circles. You have yourself, your family, your community, and so on. And you have a responsibility to the community to be an active participant to the best of your ability. And that's something that they always tried to make sure that we understood, not by saying you have a responsibility to be part of the community, but by showing us by example. So we grew up with community responsibility as a normal part of the ethic of the family.
I remember when we were doing the restoration of the Statue of Liberty in the 1980s, and Bob Tisch was then the head of tourism for New York.
New York Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Yes, and I had a number of meetings with him talking about how New York was going to be able to do all this, and how we were able to be able to do all this. Remarkably, it all happened, and it went very well. We had more than 6 million people. He was a leader in helping us with one of our goals, which was to put on the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty. And now his nephew is on the board. As you know, because you're on the committee, we are planning expansion of immigration stories at Ellis Island. And there are so many. Some of them are the same. I mean, there's a general theme, but I enjoyed, I don't know if I can, there it is, Journeys in American Story. Oh, yes. Yeah, I think I got it from some guy named Tisch, who wrote it. And I think I've read every one of them, but about a year ago. And so I had to go back when I was asked, just pick 3. And I want to tell you who I picked, but then I want to know how you picked, because there are 70 some of these. I picked Pete Gogolak, One, because I'm a football fan, and so I knew of him. But the bigger reason was I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. And during the Hungarian Revolution in, I think, 1956,
56.
Towns all over the country adopted a Hungarian family. And our town adopted a Hungarian family. And it all seemed so interesting to me at the point in time. I knew my family had come, I was in high school, so I knew my family had come through Ellis Island. I wasn't quite in high school, but, and I was thinking about this family that we had sponsored. And of course, the Gogolaks he became, I think, does he hold the record for points after?
I believe he still holds the Giants record for total points.
Total points. Remarkable guy. Then I picked Linda Hills, not because she was an immigrant, but because I guess it was her grandfather or great-grandfather was Andrew Carnegie. And once again, going back to my small town in the Midwest, we had a Carnegie library. And I was a big reader. So I spent a lot of time at the Carnegie Library in Warsaw, Indiana. And finally, the other person that I picked, of course, we all saw him when we opened the Liberty Museum because he came to sing, was Tony Bennett. Now we understand that he's not in good health now, but what a wonderful man and what a wonderful career, and that typical Italian transverse from Naples to, in his case, Astoria, Queens, and enormous fame in one generation. So I could have picked any one of these, to tell you the truth, but I always, every time I'm reading one of them, I think, well, why did Andrew pick this person, and how did you get them?
First of all, getting them was the easy part. If anything, Mary Skafidis, my co-author, and I had a wealth of riches. We had more people wanted to be in the book, and a lot of the people that we asked said yes instantaneously, but we simply asked people, "What's your story?" And a typical answer was, "My story's not very interesting." And then they'd start to talk about it. And the more they talked about it, the more interesting it became to them. And of course, the more interesting it became to us. And as a result, we ended up with, people were surprised how many people were willing to tell their story publicly. But it's one of these things that people want to talk about.
Yes, they do.
It strikes a wonderful chord because with notable exceptions, it represents a highlight in their family lore. Now, the story gets complicated because there were those for whom this was not a happy event. You look at enslaved people, you look at indigenous people. This was not a happy arrival, or in the case of the indigenous people, they were not happy to have a lot of other people arriving around them. But for the most part, the people that arrived came here because they were fleeing something, because they were seeking something, what have you. There was a positive reason. But if you were to ask me my favorites, I would say that my favorites were Stephanie Murphy, who is now a congresswoman, who was a Vietnamese boat person. And you read about what her family had to endure to get from Vietnam with the North Vietnamese taking over the South, and what it took for her family to escape and being left cast adrift in the South China Sea and being rescued by the U.S. Navy. I love my rabbi's story, Angela Buckdall's story, she being half Korean and being the outsider. I guess the third one would have to be Cory Booker and what his family went through to become accepted in America. It's really the history of the civil rights movement in America is embodied in his 8 pages of story. But every one of these stories is an absolute gem, whether it's Marlo Thomas or Nancy Pelosi or Elaine Chao or anyone. And the stories are bipartisan. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Catholic or Buddhist or what. Everybody's got a story, and everybody's got an interesting story. And I think this really captured that spirit.
When we opened the Record Center at Ellis Island in 2001, we had millions and millions and millions of people come online, people complaining to me that they had to get up in the middle of the night to look for their records. People want to know about themselves. And this is one way of knowing.
When you look at what immigrants have done for this country, and it doesn't take that many generations for immigrants to make a difference. When you look at the fact that 40% of all Fortune 500 companies were started by or led by either an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. When you look at companies like Ford and U.S. Steel and Kraft Foods and Goldman Sachs, and you look at Google and Microsoft and Tesla and Amazon, these are all either founded by or led by immigrants or their children. That's a pretty impressive group of people.
That's right. And if you look at our own organization, of course, it was started by the son of immigrants, Lee Iacocca, who went on, he already was one of the leading businessmen in the country at the time that he started this organization.
Well, certainly as you look at it, with Ellis Island becoming the Museum of American Immigration, it tells the big story, and I think that's very, very important that we remember what the big story is. That we are a nation of individuals that collectively make up a much bigger, as I say, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In this case, that's what America is.
I couldn't agree more with you. And in fact, that symbol behind you, the Statue of Liberty, if you think about it, it stands for everything that, this was not planned, by the way, that Ellis Island would be located right next to the Statue of Liberty. In fact, when Ellis Island was started, the Statue of Liberty was still viewed by most people as a lighthouse. And why did we need it? Obviously, we have a different view of it today, but it stands for all those things: freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of being able to be who you want to be. So we've generally been a country of welcome and bringing together different foods and different music and different religions and different, so many different things, but all together, usually all together trying to achieve something.
We're in our book, Mary and I talk about we're not a melting pot. We're not a homogeneous recipe that makes the same tasting soup with every every addition of ingredients. We're a mosaic.
Yeah.
We're stones of different textures and different colors and different sizes that are put together, and the grout is what holds us together. The grout is the freedom, the expression, the ability to do things within what is the constitutionally allowable rules of engagement in America. But without that grout, we're nothing but a pile of rocks. And we are really a glorious mosaic, and we need to celebrate that.
Thank you, Andrew, author of Journeys. So if people are interested in the Journeys book, it's a wonderful book full of 70 or plus stories of people's remembrance of coming to America or the story of their families coming to America. You can go to statueofliberty.org and we'll send you a copy. And you'll enjoy it. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. Well, thank you, Andrew Tisch.
Thank you, Steve, and I will see you soon, not virtually, but hopefully in person.
I hope so.